We sat down with members of the community with an exercise which allowed them to envision how they would like to see their settlement 10 years from now. They envisioned that in the future their children will be able to play outside on clean streets without having to worry about the smoke that used to come from the landfill. They will be able to bathe in the river again and fish from it as a source of livelihood. The rainy season won't make them worry, as flooding will be a thing of the past. The landfill will disappear and a lively community will exist instead. Actors at all levels, from a government leader to a baker in Colletown, will collaborate and turn to the solutions and partnerships to chart a new course together. Their efforts will be bold, efficient, effective, for the benefit of everyone, all 21,000 inhabitants, for a collaborative, hazard-free CKG. The question is, how do we get to that future from where we are today? A community that has been largely impacted by natural hazards, diseases, and the burden of waste. To answer this, we must understand the history of CKG and the evolution of the problems we see today. CKG is composed of three communities: Crabtown, Colletown, and Greybush. In the early 1970s, Greybush was founded when laborers constructing the National Stadium settled. As a central location in Freetown with available land, this area continued to expand with urban immigration for livelihood opportunities. In the 1980s, people started reclaiming land along the Crocodile River in an area characterized by mangroves and crabs forming Crabtown. This practice has continued into the coastal zone near Bomekington landfill forming Colletown. As well as pull factors, push factors have accelerated in migration into the settlements, such as displacement from the Civil War and high rent prices in other areas of the city. Today, CKG's growth appears to be entering a new phase in which densification is replacing expansion. The settlement is becoming consolidated. Normal land can be taken from the Crocodile River, and in Colletown, expansion towards the landfill and coastline is ongoing, but at a much slower rate. As the settlement boundaries have expanded, people living in lower elevation zones have become more exposed to hazards. For instance, the narrowing of the Crocodile River has increased the impacts of flooding, especially since 2009. Similarly, in Colletown, houses encroaching into the landfill are more exposed to everyday health hazards.
They get cold, malaria, anyway,
Frequent fires result from increasing household connections overburdening electricity meters with limited oversight on the quality of cables. The spatial distribution of hazards can also be evidenced through the accumulation of waste. Liquid and solid waste discharged into the Crocodile River and the drainage channels from the upper areas of the settlement and other sites across the city and accumulates downstream toward White Mines Bay. The accumulation of spatial risk is exacerbated in the rainy season. Interaction between waste and water leads to contamination of wells and water taps, causing sanitation problems. Also, seasonal peaks in malaria are evident, from 2 cases in April to over 170 last September. In CKG, risks have increased over time, accumulating spatially and exacerbated seasonally, and they continue to be driven by the increasing flow of people into the settlement in the absence of planning. But to what extent do individuals or self-organizing groups across CKG have capacity to act against these risks? Is the capacity to act strengthened by institutional actors, and how effective are their interventions in preventing and mitigating risks? During our 2 weeks of fieldwork that were preceded by 4 months of research in London, we addressed these questions by conducting trust-site walks, focus groups, hazard and intervention mappings, surveys, and informal interviews with the purpose of identifying social and environmental risk determinants and drivers. Using a range of indicators, we found that there appear to be differences in individual capacity to act across Greybush, Crabtown, and Colletown. Greybush contains the highest percentage of permanent housing, with Colletown having predominantly temporary structures which provide unreliable shelter during the rainy season. Efforts to mitigate effects of floods are seen in Crabtown and Colletown, such as strengthening houses, building retention walls, or sandbanking, but these are largely limited by financial resources. For example, there is a lower monthly income in Colletown and high unemployment rates. High tenancy rates exist across the whole settlement, and we found that some tenants felt discouraged to take preventive measures for fear of landlords increasing rent prices. Collective efforts also exist. For example, 18 savings groups have emerged in CKG since 2014, but their coverage is still limited due to a high minimum threshold for joining. Unluckily, these groups are not coordinated, and those who can save often spend these on material goods or welfare. In addition, self-organized youth groups focus on a broad range of community development initiatives, but similar problems of uncoordination exist. For instance, regular house-to-house waste collection by youth groups only occur in Greybush.
Don't clean the compound with the grass in they pay me 30,000. Yes.
Okay. And this is mainly in which area?
Greybush community.
Greybush.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Some collective efforts across CKG are mainly reactive, visible during times of emergency, such as Greybush residents offering accommodation to flood-affected residents of Crabtown and Colletown. Consequently, the burden of risk remains largely individualized, accumulating in more exposed areas of the settlement due to 1. The distribution of hazards and capacity across CKG, and 2. The limited capacity to disrupt the risk accumulation cycles.
Years back in 2015, because I'm one of the flood victims, YMCA give us loan. They give us loan.
It was
a grant in our community, so we should pay back. They give us the money the 15th. They say we have to pay back the money. But the day they give us the money, we have the disaster, that flood, that take a call.
Our research has shown that institutional interventions are fragmented across the settlement, with multiple actors playing roles that undermine the collaborative efforts for the prevention and mitigation of hazards and the post-disaster relief. Though we recognize the complex institutional environment that exists, this has acted as a hindrance for the effective delivery of interventions. For instance, there are 9 intervention channels towards the community that have an influence to improve capacity to act against hazards. These channels overlay one with another in terms of the different mandates, protocols, and funding to manage disasters, with members themselves getting lost in the confusion of what they are tasked to do. Furthermore, although we recognize the efforts of CBDMC and FEDERP in galvanizing the community to create a collaborative platform, there is significant potential to synergize these actors by enabling the right processes for them to conduct their work free of duplication or overlap in their mandates. During our survey exercise, the disconnect between this institution and the people was shown. The majority of the respondents were not aware of these local organizations, let alone the interventions that they have implemented.
See that in the year 2028, we have a hazard-free community by CKG, by the grace of God.
From our fieldwork, we obtained the future that the community envisioned, and from our findings, we explore the obstacles that prevent them from reaching that vision through the various risk traps that manifest in CKG. We have examined the spatial and temporal context in which hazards occur versus the existing capacity to act. Therefore, our strategy was created to close the gap between where they are today and where they want to be tomorrow. This strategy is divided into 3 pillars, with respective objectives to each pillar. It is worth noting that the strategy was built on the ongoing practices and efforts of all actors in the community. All the detailed information of the strategies can be found in the appendix to this video. The first pillar deals with infrastructure and services. Deficiencies in infrastructure and basic services are predominant factors intensifying people's exposure to hazards. On the one hand, waste accumulation in the streets, drainages, and the Crocodile River are a main source of hazards in lower elevated areas. On the other, quality of electricity cables and overloaded meters pose significant problems in Colletown, causing fires. To build a safer environment where the community can thrive, we propose 4 objectives aimed at the short term. 1. Using FEDERP's established network to create a waste bank. This model of turning waste into an economic opportunity has worked successfully in informal settlements in Indonesia and Thailand, and we believe it has the potential to expand in CKG. 2. Using the existing savings group as a mechanism to enhance community infrastructure involving a 2-step process. Firstly, incentives to join must be created so that members' benefits outweigh the costs. We propose collaboration with institutional partners to provide training for members, such as financial literacy or skills development. Secondly, once the savings group have sufficient demand, we propose to implement a small joining fee, which will be deposited at a community fund for infrastructure improvements, such as building community septic tanks and toilets that will prevent wastewaters from being discharged into the river and the sea. 3. Expanding the coverage of the house-to-house waste collection services currently delivered by youth groups in Greybush. Implementing a compound-to-compound model at a lower rate would make the service more affordable for residents with lowest incomes. And 4. Train the community on how to identify low-quality electricity cables in order to prevent fires. This activity could be developed in collaboration with the energy company and can build upon the existing practices of the community of having control over electricity cables and connections in some areas of the settlement. The second pillar deals with urban planning. Underdevelopment and unplanned expansion in CKG have led to the creation of risk cycles and ecological degradation. To disrupt them, we propose the regeneration of the urban and natural environment through the following sets of actions. In the short term, we advocate for the creation of a database compiled through participatory surveying activities, such as census, mapping of structures, interventions and hazards, and mapping of vacant land. This can be achieved through collaborative efforts involving FEDERB, FCC and other governmental authorities, CBOs, and academics. These actions empower the community to utilize knowledge as catalyzer for the formulation and implementation of development planning interventions. In the medium term, we recommend the establishment of community-led negotiations aiming at future redefinition of land use and property boundaries. This has the potential to enable planned densification of the settlement, improvements in housing quality, legal ownership rights over land, and the implementation of a zoning scheme. This participatory demarcation should be undertaken in coordination with the Ministry of Lands, FCC, and the assistance of NGOs and academics. In the long term, once land tenure is defined, housing provision could be secured through a rent-to-own program. Such program can be implemented with the support of international agencies and partnerships between the government, NGOs, and the private sector. During this phase, it is also emphasized the importance of recovering the Crocodile River and the coastal zone for ecological, social, and economic purposes. Similarly, we recommend the closure of the landfill and its restoration to place residential developments for relocated houses of CKG as a result of the before-mentioned land redefinition process. Institutional complexities existing in CKG undermine the potential for delivering interventions. We propose to construct coordinated, transparent, and participatory governance mechanisms. This could help to ensure the effective management of risk and deliver platforms for collaboration and a productive partnership to benefit the community. In the short term, we propose strengthening governance systems for disaster risk management. This is directed towards CBDMC and FEDERB. In the medium term, we propose the establishment of a coordination unit that reduces the fragmentation of interventions and resources that today hinder the development process. The journey towards a collaborative and hazard-free CKG is one that will not be easy. There will be obstacles and challenges along the way, but through its rich history of resilience and determination, CKG will succeed. Building on the existing efforts, there is every opportunity today to build for tomorrow.